Hello, my name is David Turner and this is episode 12 of the Lunar Poetry Podcast. And today I'm in Hackney in East London and I'm joined by Paula Varjack and James Harris. Hello, both of you.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello. We'll start, as always, with my guests giving an introduction to themselves and we'll begin with James.
Hello, my name is James. I'm 33 years old and I'm a writer and comedian from Nottingham.
Thank you very much. And Paula.
My name is Paula Varjack and I am what am I calling myself today? I am a theatre and video artist, and I'm from a lot of places, but I've spent most of my life now in London.
And you both have known each other for a little while now?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, James keeps following me from different houses.
It's true. It's true.
You have to explain that so it doesn't sound totally weird and creepy.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what people would imagine just from that statement. Yeah, I occasionally pop up in Paula's residence like some obscure fungus. It started in Berlin, and Paula, I was sans domicile fixe, without a fixed address. And Paula was good enough to lend me her keys for the weekend when you were away a bit longer, and then I was waiting for an apartment to become free, so I stayed in Paula's flat for a little while that happened, and then a while later Paula said that she was going to be hiring out a spare bedroom here. That was over 2 years ago now. So, yeah.
But I came back to London first.
That's true.
He did actually follow me from Berlin.
That's true, yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad he did, though.
Yeah, it's been really good.
This episode is going to focus on the idea of peer critiquing or seeking advice from friends or fellow artists in order to develop projects. So I met Paula in the summer when I recorded a series of short extracts from Edinburgh shows, and Paula came and very kindly did 10 minutes from your show. What was it called again? How
I Became Myself by Becoming Someone Else.
Yeah, and I was going to say typically gave my opinion on everything and was invited to this group that Paula runs called Invite Only, which meets up every month and allows people to pitch ideas and get feedback, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. But first we'll take a reading from Paula, which I believe you first shared at one of these groups.
Yes. We're going to have some assistance from James, as there's 2 lines that don't belong to me.
Please provide a brief summary of your recent relevant artistic work experience and achievements.
I am an artist. I make art that is particularly artistic, with a focus on people are people, but sometimes they're not. I trained in an art school, and then at another art school, where I attained a qualification in making art. Since then, I have done this, and 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 now I am so in demand that I never stop. There's never a moment when I'm not either making art or being commissioned and programmed to make more art. I am like an art robot who makes unique work that is accessible. My work is so accessible. People of every age and race and religion and color and sexuality and ability all see themselves in my work. My practice is practical, classical, contemporary, postmodern, current, and now. I am so busy. I write and devise and design and film and facilitate and curate and produce and perform and promote. I am so busy that I can barely manage my inbox. And because I'm so busy and hard to get hold of, programmers have to call me in the middle of the night just to book me years in advance because their program depends on it. I am so busy. And now I need time. I imagine money like someone I have this on-again, off-again relationship with. Sexy but toxic. I try again and again to make it work long-term, but I can't see us settling down even though they're always on my mind. I know that if I see them, I won't be able to think straight. And before I know it, we'll have stayed out all night, it'll be morning, they'll be gone, and I'll have no idea where they went or if I'm ever going to see them again. I can't work them out. And as much as I try to manage them, they're always the one in control.
What is your proposed activity, and what do you want to achieve by doing it?
I want to research and develop the research and development of a piece that explores how we explore, investigating and interrogating, reflecting on reflections while raising new questions about questions. This piece will be especially targeted at those society fails to target, including the excluded, while simultaneously being relevant and engaging for all. This piece will also subconsciously explore diversity, as I am a queer woman of color. I want to pay myself an amount decided by the letters I, T, and C every week for 4 weeks so I can stop, research, reflect, and catch up on the new season of How to Get Away with Murder on Netflix. Several organizations have expressed an interest in expressing an interest.
Thank you very much. I really like that one. So like I said, we're going to start by talking about the group that you run, Invite Only. We should start with like the nuts and bolts of it and what the structure is and how often it runs. So if you can start with.
So Invite Only is a group that I've been running for just over a year now, and I set it up because what I wanted was a group of artists of different disciplines who could give feedback to each other around work that they were currently developing. And I started it primarily because I'd been living in Berlin for 4 years. I moved back to London, and I felt like there wasn't really anywhere in the city that felt safe to try things out and kind of to fuck up. I did find that there was a really healthy workshop scene for performers, primarily in live art, where there was some kind of like supportive feedback, but then that was always built around exercises that a facilitator wanted to look at for own practice. So I wanted to kind of take that element of that, and often the people I met in those spaces, and create another space where rather than it being exercise driven, it was just about people in a room had stuff that they were working on. And it was called Invite Only because I also felt that while the Scratch format is quite useful and quite helpful, what I wanted was a space where the feedback wasn't coming from just random people in an audience, but it was actually very curated. So everyone in the group is someone that I've met, whose work I'm familiar with, and often they've come to the group because of a combination of being interested in what they're doing with their practice, but also because I'm interested in the way that they give feedback.
So how do the nights or the evening groups work in terms of structure?
So the idea is that we meet for 2 hours. Last year we were meeting in the evenings once a month, usually the first Monday or Tuesday of the month from 7:30 to 9:30. We've recently changed that because some people in the group are better for afternoons and some people better in the evenings. So now we alternate. But the idea is that there are 5 slots. The first 5 people who sign up for those slots get them. It's time to pitch an idea, to perform something, to play or present a bit of something for 10 minutes, and then you have 10 minutes from the group wherein to give feedback. The reason it's 2 hours and the reason it's that many slots is from the first few sessions we kind of found that 2 hours and 5 people, 20 minutes each, was sort of around the time that people were still engaged, and because it's quite exhausting actually giving feedback and going into different pieces. So that's what it is. So it's like 5 slots, 10 minutes to present, 10 minutes of feedback each, and I'm pretty fascistic about the time slot because it's really important for me that, for example, people earlier on don't end up getting more time, the people at the end don't end up getting less time. Often people have to worry about getting across town to go home, so there's always kind of a tension at the end about overrunning because people get home. So I really want to make sure everyone has exactly their slot.
And James, you're quite regular attendee of these groups as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much excuse because it's normally happening in my living room, so missing it would be fairly bad form. But I've been to, I would say, I think all of them in some capacity or other.
I think you missed one.
I think I missed one, and there was one where I came very, very late. So, yeah, I mean, I've given a lot of feedback, but I've also used it to show things which I'm working on.
And at the last group, Paula, you talked about the importance of continuity within the group, and maybe you could both talk a bit about how important continuity is as someone that runs an event and someone that attends an event.
No, I'm really curious what Jane's going to say. Okay, so I think the group has been really successful in that it's still running after a year. I'm regularly getting feedback saying it's something that's been really important and useful. It's made new links between artists who don't know each other, because that was a key thing for me as well. It's like I wanted a group of people who, for the most part, didn't know each other outside of the group, because I thought that was important. But in terms of continuity, I suppose what I initially wanted was a space where people were not just coming because they had something that they wanted to present, but they were coming because they were actively interested in supporting other artists through giving them feedback. And what I found is within the group, there's about 35 people, I think, on the list. There's maybe like a critical mass of, I'd say, 6, of which I think now you and James are within, who will have a pretty, good repeat rate of coming back. But for the most part, I would say the majority of people in the group, for work commitments and life commitments and whatever, tend to kind of come because they have something that they're working on, and then don't come again, which is completely understandable. But one of the things that I want to kind of push this year is to really encourage more of a continuity, so that people are coming regardless of whether they're presenting something or not. Because I just feel like it's better for the sake of the feedback if there's a sense of like what the development of a project is. And also I'm thinking that in some cases people are going to dip into the group with different stages of a work, and it's just better if they don't have to explain what the work is every single time, for example. Over to James.
Well, I would say, speaking in my specific case, going back a lot and having a continuity of people is really good for a comedian, because if I want to take material in an interesting direction, it might not necessarily be safe material. It might be material which is talking about something really difficult, or I might just be doing something which is outside of my comfort zone. For example, I did like a character at one of the invite only, and it was a really, really good place to start something like that because of the safeness of the atmosphere. So I think having people come repeatedly is really good, because you create an atmosphere where people can try out without any fear that you're going to be criticized in a way which isn't about making the thing better. Criticism in the sort of way an audience can give you, which is like, stop doing this thing. But that's not necessarily always right, because if we listen to audiences when they tell us that every time, a lot of the most interesting stuff wouldn't actually get developed, particularly in comedy, where when comedians go and talk about really dangerous material, I think one of the reasons they're rewarded by an audience is because the risk of them failing is also quite great when they take that subject. And so I think a group like Invite Only, and the idea of like getting to know a group of people who know that you're trying stuff out is really important.
There's a big element of trust in it, isn't there? Because you're bringing work presumably that you would never show to an audience.
Exactly.
And you can present it without being destroyed or laughed at for the wrong reasons off stage.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing that I was thinking about in terms of continuity. But the reason I like coming as regularly as possible is because then you know who you trust the most, and then very rarely the people that agree with you, are they? It's not people. It's not that you're in a room with everyone telling you you're great. And it's nice to build up a rapport with people, and to know whose opinions you appreciate the most, and who will cut through whatever you feel is unnecessary and get to the point. Yeah.
Because you're right. That's true. There's something about, and I mean, this is why I think finding peers whose feedback you respect is so valuable, because it's about understanding. James's bias is maybe a little bit more towards this, or so you kind of go like, okay, I can contextualize what the response is to what I know about them. But I think the advantage of the group, as opposed to people in the group just going to their friends, is I brought together people who, for the most part, have met through the group. So from the outset, they're able to kind of have like this candid response of talking to someone that you don't know really well, not worrying too much about how it's going to affect your relationship, but then bringing that forward.
And how important to your own writing is this kind of sharing with peers and contemporaries?
It's really great for comedy to have a stage which is before getting on stage. Although I think any arrangement where people are watching your stuff, I have to say, I think probably because a comedian is looking for something so specific, like a laugh is a laugh. So if something isn't getting any laughter, even there's, with 8 or 10 people in the room, it's still a pretty good indicator. But I think it's, I think for me, it's really, really valuable.
I think for me, it depends where I am in the stage that I'm at with the work. Like the show that I'm making right now, Show Me the Money. I'm working with a dramaturg, that's already a very collaborative relationship. My dramaturg Martin Bankson, he's my best friend, and we've been working together for a long period of time. So I think within the context of where we are with Show Me the Money, I'm not interested in taking that piece where it is now into the group, because I've already kind of got this ongoing dialogue with one collaborator, and I think I just get super confused to kind of throw it out to the group. But having it as a space to talk to at the very beginning of an idea, at the kind of literally like, I don't even know what this idea is, I'm going to mumble out this half sentence, is super helpful. I think I've also started to use the group much more as a kind of creative, it's like support group therapy for creatives kind of thing, which is super useful because everyone is working in different disciplines, and almost the majority of us are freelancers, so there's all kinds of questions that come out around negotiation and representation and stuff. So that's mega useful.
Yeah, my next question was going to be actually, at what stage would you typically share ideas? And you probably just answered that quite well. But James, would you, because like you said, as a comedian, because what you're looking for is a very definite and specific thing, is it more useful for you to pitch very, very early ideas and then just move straight into audiences?
I could use the group. I could present every time to the group. It would be useful for me every time, because I've always... if I had like a regular slot in the group, like opening the group this week with the whatever, because I've always got some ideas. I think the kind of main benefit of it is that everyone in the group is so nice and supportive that if you are doing something which is as lonely as comedy, and I don't even mean that in terms of the social aspect of comedy, I mean just the travelling around London and often playing to very empty places. Just having a group of people who are all kind of warm and nice is as invaluable as anything, So I could, it will always be useful at any time to present with.
So we're going to take another reading now, and it's from James this time.
Okay, well, I'm going to read from very near the beginning of my novel, Midlands, which I have finished. I'm going to do a Scottish accent for one of the characters, so I'd like to apologise in behalf of the people of Scotland. This is from about the third page of the book, so it's very near the beginning. I'm quite excited to read this in front of Paula because it's set at Berlin Central Bus Station, which is a place I believe we have both frequented in our time. Okay. For the record, Stuart had got there first. It was just before 8. The time of meeting had been discussed through text messages the evening before, and Stuart had arrived slightly early. Waiting, he had sat at a bench inside the waiting area, a small series of brown plastic chairs within the seedy-worn station, unchanged since its construction in the 1960s. He was eating a couple of bread rolls from a brown bakery bag and looking out the window at the bus bay. He looked across the concrete bay with its brutalist architecture, its unsheltered bus stops, and large white and green buses heading to Belarus, to Sofia, to Tallinn. When he looked up, a small man was sitting opposite him. He had a dirty face and greasy hair and a small, absurdly isolated clump, and wore a shabby moleskin jacket. In his hand was a small paper tray with a sausage on it. "I want a Brötchen," the man said. Stuart had half a bread roll left, which he had already partly chewed. "But I've already bitten into it," he said. "Doesn't matter," said the man. Stuart handed him the remainder of the roll. Receiving it, the man bent forward and began using it to mop up the remaining mustard. As he did, he made quiet scoffing noises. Stuart looked away and, rooting deeper in his bag, found and began eating the slightly damaged banana he had brought. The man finished the bread roll and spoke, still looking down. "I need €1." Stuart looked back. "I don't have one," he said. The man made an apparently accepting grunt and returned to the tray where he finished his sausage. Stuart watched him, his little face chewing. He noticed the dirt on the man's cracked fingernails. The man finished eating. He sat down the tray and let out a satisfied gasp. "But I need €1 unbedingt. I absolutely need €1. Stuart repeated. "I don't have one." "Why not?" "Because I don't. It's my choice," said Stuart. There was a slightly longer pause. The man appeared to be giving great thought to Stuart's response as he chewed up the very last of his sausage. Then after a pause he said, "Du bist dumm." "You're stupid." "What?" "Du, you're stupid. Dumm, Dummgans, silly goose." The man was staring at him, quite clearing out. "Du bist ein Arschloch." "You're an arsehole." And then, like some tiny little bird, like the preening display of a hibernating disturb, stuck out his tongue, exposing his throat to emit a little hostile beep of displeasure. "Nee." Stuart sat looking at him. He was smiling already, thinking of telling Dougie about it, about how he had wanted to say, "You'll have to try harder, mate, I'm from the Midlands," when through the window he saw his friend at the bus bay. "Excuse me," he said, standing and leaving the tramp behind. Dougie was waiting at their stop, wind-ruffled, bareheaded, leather jacket buttoned high. "All right, pal?" "All right, mate," said Stuart. "This our bus, eh?" They were in front of their ride, a huge single-decker chariot of a striking pale green. "I think so." "Nice, nice. I'm telling you, man, it was hard to get up this morning when you've got a beautiful lady lying next to you. You know how it is." "At the moment, I do." "Ah, you dirty dog, you. You'll have to tell me about that later. Should we get on? Looks like he's ready for us." The driver had turned the engine on and his assistant was gesturing to people around the bus to begin loading their suitcases. Dougie and Stuart had just tote bags with them, so they joined the queue at the bus's front entrance. As they waited, Stuart told him about the tramp. "Really?" said Dougie, laughing. "You've got a bit there, man." Stuart said, "Yeah, I wanted to say to him, you know, I'm from the Midlands, right?" He repeated the man's little "nah" sound a few times, trying to get it right, knowing that only if he reproduced it exactly as it occurred would it be funny. They were now at the front of the queue, and Stuart handed over a printout of their tickets. The driver, in white shirt and enormous sand-rimmed glasses, authorised their entrance with a simple performative "Ja." Dougie went first, ascending the step into the large plus bus. There were few people around, and they found 2 free spaces 2/3 of the way down, with Dougie, after they got comfy, saying, "This is nice, Manny. How much were the tickets?" They were cheap, and despite this there would be time during the journey to spread out, to occasionally move to separate pairs of seats, to retreat into their own little worlds of writing text messages and preparing sets.
Thank you very much. I was glad that it was the second guy he was talking to that turned out to be Scottish.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Because I thought he was doing a really terrible accent there. And so, so in terms of seeking advice from critiquing groups, how did that help you at all in developing the novel?
Not that specific novel, but I did work with what in the end was 4 different people editing the book,
okay.
Which I've been writing for a long time. And I thought it was quite pertinent to this discussion because I created a series of editors graded by difficulty. So I had a friend of mine who is a very positive individual, but also very positive about my writing. So I would send it him and he would sort of say, "Oh, it's great," and correct the spelling. And then it went to the next person, another good friend of mine who was positive but would give me very specific feedback. And then it would go to a man who is incredibly harsh and critical of everything I do. and would basically tear it to pieces. So it was this idea of getting it to pass every gatekeeper, and then another Alan, who obviously we know well, came in at the end as a kind of fourth editor with the kind of finished book. So it was literally once I got the assent from every individual person that I finally submitted the book back to a publisher.
Were they all called Alan?
No.
The 4 levels of Alan.
Alan could do that.
Yeah,
he could do that. He could play a succession of roles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really has been very collaborative writing process.
And actually, it's really, I hadn't read properly what you were going to read, and in terms of the setting, because I wanted to go on and talk about the differences between London and Berlin. And yeah, I suppose what I wanted to ask is, when you moved, obviously you both know London, you knew London anyway before you moved back, relocated from Berlin. But this time around, were there any major differences that you noticed between the way that creatives share their ideas and develop?
I feel like James should talk first because you came here much more recently.
And I didn't know at all. About just over 2 years now. Well, I mean, the contrast was really, really strong for me at the beginning. I found it really tough, and I found that I was in a comedy community in Berlin, which was very much a community, very, very collaborative, and I enjoyed a certain amount of respect from the other comedians here, and so I was starting out from zero. But I mean, people move to Berlin to be creative or to live a life where the financial issues aren't so great that they can develop their creativity. So I think there's a removing of some kind of pressure and competition from that, but at the other end of the scale, because the rewards are smaller and because there's less success for people there, I think that removes some of the competitive element as well. So I think Berlin, in my experience, was very collaborative, and that's how we first met, wasn't it? We're working together on a sketch for a comedy show, and that felt very easy, that kind of collaboration happening all the time.
But I think I'm kind of curious about, because maybe have you been more recently than me? Yeah, you must have done.
Last time I was in Berlin was coming up to a year ago.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the thing, because for me, one of the differences was it was just much, when we were there before living there, it was much easier to just get space. Like if you wanted to run a night, you could kind of just run a night, and without any profile to talk of. There are just so many spaces that you could just go in and say, yeah, I fancy running a cabaret night, or I fancy running a spoken word night or a comedy night, and there's going to be 4 or 5 performers. I'm going to try to sell tickets, but this is what I'm doing. And then the bar would usually just go, yeah, great, and not even have a conversation about higher fees, and then give you drinks tickets for 5 or 6 performers. And then if it didn't even work, it would be fine somehow. It's like, as long as it were like some people, or as long as like you and your friends who were doing the night drank after you drank your drink tickets, it was kind of okay. And I don't think that's, I don't know, I guess the main thing is just, it seems like there was much more room to fail, and there was more space to just kind of try things out. But on the flip side, it seemed like there were less routes to then go from that underground and actually build relationships with major institutions.
I mean, for me as a comedian, the biggest thing, there were a couple of things I really noticed. Lack of drinks tickets was one of the early ones. I think I've had about 4 free drinks in my entire time in a year gigging, but I've really enjoyed them. But the just sheer lack of stage time for someone starting in London. And what that does is it develops your comedy in a very different way, because if you've got a 5-minute set and you've got to kind of impress someone in the 5 minutes, well, to be honest, when I listen to clips of myself, which I don't do often, of my sets in Germany, I'm normally talking bollocks for the first 5 minutes, just trying to get everyone to calm down and put their drinks away. I mean, that is very hard for a young comedian who's starting out. Like, let's say they get their 5-minute set and somebody walks through to the bathroom in the middle of their set. That's their 5 minutes for the evening basically sabotaged, So just by dint of that structure, you are restricting people's creativity in a way, because if there's any comedian who wants to do anything really experimental within that 5 minutes, everyone's just going to think, well, they're rubbish.
But on the flip side, I think you also, I mean, I playing devil's advocate, I think sometimes it's a bit too easy there, but it's a little bit too unforgiving here. You know,
they are quite opposite. And I was having this discussion today with someone regarding spoken word scene. In that, I spent a lot of time last year trying to develop sort of improvised stuff, but I never had enough time because you get commonly, typically you get 4 or 5 minutes in an open mic slot. And it would take about 3.5 minutes for people to get their head around the fact that I hadn't just wandered in off the street and sort of just forced my way onto stage. So there is definitely, I would agree, there does seem like a lack of time to develop things in London, whereas you're probably right, there maybe is you've got too much of a free rein perhaps in Berlin to just keep doing what you want, and there's perhaps not enough of a focus. But since I mentioned spoken word there, I wanted to, since it's called the Poetry Podcast, we should talk about poetry in some way. I just wanted to ask, do you think that poets and novelists are more guarded than other writers in terms of their work?
Guarded in what sense?
Less inclined to share early ideas.
Oh, what do you think?
I think that novels are very slow to write, and that
I don't know why anyone.
But yeah, I mean, it's a sort of like Test cricket or something. It's a long form in a kind of short form world. But I think novels are like during the process of writing them, they're generally in an awful state because you're trying to fix lots of different parts of this huge thing. So, for example, I sent the novel out when I was working on it to a friend, and she just absolutely trashed it. But that feedback was of no use because there was a part of the novel which was just a few drafts further down the line, and she said that's really good, and the rest of it's rubbish. Well, of course, but I can't give somebody that and kind of preclude what I'm giving them with a kind of apology for how it is.
The reason I paired poets and novelists together there is because I think in most people's minds it's the most solitary form of writing.
Sure.
So people go and take themselves away and write in that way.
A novel much more. I mean, I couldn't even imagine writing a novel, but I mean, like, I live with 2 novel writers, and I think it definitely, you can wake up in the morning and like turn out a poem like 10 minutes later. I mean, of course, there could be a revising process, but a novel is really something you are separating yourself almost from yourself in a way, or you're going deeper into yourself. Like, it's a very...
I think what I was trying to get is that you feel when you're embarked on something of that length that you've just got to get it done, and kind of any energy which is detracting from that process of getting it done, i.e. the question, what is your novel about? If the novel's not done, like, you're kind of making a pitch for something which you don't even really know you're going to finish, or you don't feel... I mean, I've always known that I would finish it because that's just how I am, but... so I think that's where that guardedness with writing books.
But so if you compared a novelist, for example, to someone that writes for the stage, playwright, they often, you're writing in quite a long form, but is it just a cultural thing that there is more workshopping involved in that form of writing? Because it does seem that people that write in that way for stage are much more open about talking about their ideas in earlier stages of development. I was just wondering whether that's because that form of writing attracts those, like, a more open person, or whether it's just a cultural thing that already exists.
Well, it's weird because I kind of feel like I've only known one screenwriter well enough to have any sense of what that's like, but I feel like that has much more in common with what I know of the way novel writers write novels. It seems like much more of a solitary thing. Theater is a bit different, though. I feel like there's more of a tradition of stage readings, for example, that happen fairly early on in the process, or having conversations between the with the actors and the playwright with how the text is actually functioning. But I feel like screenwriting and novel writing is much more about someone putting themselves away and really needing a lot of solitary time to make it happen.
And so Paula and I discussed very quickly earlier last week about how this discussion today would go, and we touched on briefly we both have a background in visual arts, and Paul with performance art particularly. But for instance, we both know a lot of dancers, and the sharing of ideas is very common for the dancers. The sharing of ideas for performance artists is really common. And I was just wondering, it's open to both of you, but how much of that is a cultural thing and just born in the fact that you have to share rehearsal spaces, you know, and you're on top of each other anyway, so it's more natural to chat, or whether...
I don't know if it's about sharing rehearsal spaces. Because, yeah, I remember you saying something like that, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel it has more to with performance art anyways, or live art. It's a genre that I think has much more of awareness of the fact that everything you're making is in relation to something else in a way. And is of course people are interested in making something that is distinctive to their voice, but I think there's less of an obsession of like, I've made something that no one has ever made before. It's like, no, I am different from anyone else, and my take on whatever I'm making is going to be different for that reason. Whereas I think poets, it seems like there's much more conversation within poets, the poetry scene around, oh, I had a piece about that, or, you know, oh right, I wanted to write about that, but now they've written about that, and it seems there's much more of a concern about ideas being stolen.
Yeah,
I think
sort of how the conversation went the other night as well. And so, James, how would you feel about the suggestion that poets are much more caught up on the idea of having something, this idea of having an original piece, whereas it seems for performance artists, because everything is in the context of something else, you can be very open that you've not copied but reinterpreted.
Well, nothing is original, because we're now like several millennia into human history, so we've done everything. The only things we've got are certain like small technological innovations which are unique to our time, but I don't think they've changed anything essential. So I think it's a bit of a red herring, to be honest. I mean, I can tell you comedians as well are absolutely obsessed with joke theft, and having detailed online discussions about who came up with whatever response. I mean, last week it was going around about Bowie and Rickman both died at 69. Donald Trump is 69, so that was going around. But there was a huge argument going on who had thought about joke first.
But then there was that Twitter thing too, right? Like recently there was this whole thing about comedians talking about people stealing their jokes on Twitter and not contribute. Did you read about that?
I mean, I didn't read that specific thing, but it's a constant kind of discussion.
Yeah. Because I was wondering whether that would be a reason to put people off of coming to discuss their ideas in early development, because because of this idea that people might steal an idea. You know, I think we're all in agreement that original idea wasn't their original idea anyway. But if people are too attached to something. Yeah,
I mean, I think it is, and what's also like, if somebody, whether it's poetry or comedy or whatever form, if somebody has twigged that you are doing something which is similar to what somebody else is doing, it's really important how you put that message across. If it's going to be in a friendly kind of way, like, have you seen this person, you might want to kind of look at this. But what happens is there's a kind of relish, like people appoint themselves as kind of the joke inspector, and there's a real pleasure. I remember one time I used to do a bit, and I came off stage in this, and it was similar to a bit another comedian had, but I'd come up with it myself about 5 years earlier, and I'd been doing it all that time, and then I saw it much later, so I kind of felt, well, I can keep doing this thing. And also I'm working in a different country to the comedian who did it. But he had come from London and had seen the other comedian doing his bit, and I remember just the relish in his eyes. He was literally waiting for me when I came off the stage to say, have you seen this comedian X? And it's like, got you bastard. You think you can move to Germany and steal this stuff and do it over here? And I just said to him straight away, yeah, I've seen the bit, I know it, but I know, you know, full well that I wrote my joke, and I've got more balls because I'm doing it to a load of Germans. Yeah. So, you know, but that is not the right way for these things to be policed. They shouldn't be policed. No. Unless someone is... And what you get is you kind of get ganging up on people who've got material which is similar to other people's material, and I don't think that's a very nice spectacle, really.
But the funny thing is, I have to admit, I don't really feel... most people I've invited to the group have either come or said, oh, I really want to come, but they just can't kind of manage it because of time. But I haven't really ever had someone say, I'm not sure about that. But the thing is, maybe they wouldn't say that. No one would say, I don't want to join an artist feedback group because I'm worried people are going to steal my ideas.
But Gary did say exactly that. Remember, to me about my bit.
What was that?
The bit about I have this bit about how horrible open mic comedians, and he was like, "Oh, someone's done a whole Edinburgh show about this," so it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the same as I don't want to join an artist feedback group because I'm scared of people stealing.
No, it's
I
not
don't
the
think
same,
that.
but
I think what's more common is I very often, because I'm a really big one for sharing open calls and artist opportunities and stuff. And often, I have a handful of friends who often will respond to some of them and say, "Oh, I don't know. I think this is just like BBC trying to like steal some ideas or something." And maybe that happens, and maybe I'm just like super naive, but I kind of don't buy that. Personally.
Also, I think James is completely right. You know, we all experience the same culture, where some of us are more open to popular culture than others. But essentially the same news events happen around us, and we're all exposed to the same media if you live in one country. And it's natural to have the same ideas. Like that thing about Donald Trump, of course everyone's gonna come up with that same idea. He's been on the front news of every front page of every newspaper for the last 5 months or something, you know, with his and it's very common to have the age next to it, you know, to make that leap from these are two people that have died at 69 that we would rather not have died just yet to who's the arsehole that we'd all wish would fuck off next, you know, and it's not that difficult to make that leap. But
we're all taking the same reference points, so it's not unusual that some of the same conclusions are going to come.
Do you find it unusual with that? That all being said, do you find it unusual with spoken word in particular that there isn't more general knowledge and that more work isn't put into the same context?
But general knowledge of
the history of what's.
Well, the thing is, it's like it's such a like a nebulous genre because like if you were literally saying spoken word, I mean, what is spoken? It can be everything from early lyrical poetry to, and then it's like, are we talking about it goes back to the Greeks? Are we talking about early like African storytelling, which often has a kind of lyrical content, or is it relating to chants, or there will be,
you know. Just one point, there are a lot of spoken word poets that wouldn't even be able to make that point that you just made. You know, like in what context are you going to put it in? You know, because that shows quite a deep knowledge of what the art form is, just by being able to wonder what context you should put it in. You know
but I mean that's because there's next to no critical writing and engagement with what it is, and what it is in terms of what we call it now is pretty young. So and even within that, I think for most young poets, spoken word is what they can find on YouTube. So even people who are from the 90s it's like who are they, because they don't have a YouTube presence. So I mean, how can you then kind of reflect on itself? And I think that's sort of the danger with cadence as well, because with this obsession of trying to figure out, what is a spoken word piece other than just someone talking or emceeing, or it could be comedy, or it could be song lyrics with a backing track, becomes like, we don't know what it is. Well, one way we can define it is say, we're all going to use these vocal rhythms, and that's what makes it spoken word, which I think is like really dangerous.
Yeah.
It could do with a little more, I think what communities, because I won't say there's a scene, but what communities exist around with it could do with a little bit more critical reflection.
Well, this is my point. This is the whole reason I started the podcast, was to have a wider critical discussion about what was being made, because it's not until you start that do you try and define what something might be, and it's not before. You can't put anything into context unless you define something, can you really? And then so perhaps all of these things. And it's a fair point that maybe, if I'm talking about spoken word, fair enough, it may be, as a popular art form, too new to have been put into context in that way.
But I mean, there's ways, you know, like, it's really annoying, there's literally only like 3 books on spoken word that are all American. Nothing really has been written here yet. And it's so annoying, I can't remember one of them. But the thing that really stuck with me from that book is... the woman who wrote it was talking about how the early Poetry Slam organizers, when Poetry Slam became like a national forum in America, so it was happening all over the country, which is what national means, duh. But there was a sense that you had the national slams, which is where everyone met each other, and you'd have a team from all the different cities, and that would be where you kind of had a sense of what was happening across the country. So there was that. But then the point of the bat was that then when the organizers went back to their respective cities, they would have this kind of visionary approach to how they programmed the feature acts for the monthly events, which meant that, for example, if they felt, oh, it's getting like a little bit too like silly comedy, no message every single month. It's good, but we could do with a little bit more like grit and politics in it. They would go, okay, we're gonna book these guys that we saw from New York because they had a really interesting message, as a way to kind of show the people in their local scene, oh right, this is what seems to be naturally happening where we live, but this is a way to open your eyes generally, and so on. Maybe people in New York would be like, oh, we're getting a little bit ranty, we could do with a bit of humor, so we're going to book that woman who won from Oakland. And I think more of that could be happening, like a more sort of visionary approach to booking features, which isn't just about, oh, I've seen them and they're a name and they're good enough, but like, oh, actually, what does our local scene need? What are the kind of stories that are missing? What are the thematics that are missing? What are the tones that are missing?
I think there's definitely a void within spoken word which could be filled by some sort of curation of events. Is that what you were sort of getting towards as well? Like,
well, I don't want to disrespect because so many of my friends are organizers. I don't want to disrespect that.
No, but I would put myself in that. You know, I along with Lizzie, we ran a night for over a year, and I'd put myself in that position. You know, there was a lot more we could have done in order to make sure the event was more diverse, and I mean more diverse in the types of acts that were on. We had limitations in that we had no budget. You know, we could only put on people that were willing to come for free, and on the nights that they were available. But I'm definitely in that category myself. I mean, I would have liked to have made more of an effort to. It sounds arrogant to say that, to expose our regular audience members with a different kind of poetry than they would normally see, but it shouldn't be arrogant. I think that's the point of putting a night on.
But then you also
if you're booking features, sorry, not if you're on an open mic night,
yeah,
you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, but then on a business level, you also kind of have to then make your promoting model. Also, you have to kind of build into it. Okay, well, if I'm going to build a night, for example, that relies on regularly having features from out of town, then it can't be an unpaid night. Then already I have to work into it. I'm going to build a night where I need to have a minimum of 50 quid, which, say if it's a London artist, is an okay fee. But if it's someone out of town, at least I can say, sorry, like, we can only really cover your travel. It demands planning much further in advance, because in order to get a ticket that's cheap enough where you can get like a return for that 50 quid as far as you can go, you're going to have to book it 2 or 3 months in advance. But it's all possible. It's just it just takes a little bit more work.
Yeah.
You know?
So
that's all I can say on that.
Yeah, I think we'll end on that note anyway, because we've spent enough time talking about that. So what? Maybe we could just finish up with what you're both up to next. What you've got coming up, James?
I've got very little coming up.
Perfect.
That's not true.
No, it's well. I mean,
you've got a great gig in February.
That's true. I'm going. Spain, are you ready? I'm going to perform in the 8th country, which I performed until now.
You've got a nickname and everything.
Yeah, El Coño. Apparently that's what the headliner is known as in Spanish, which apparently is the turd, which I think is much better than headliner. Yeah, so I'll be in Madrid, and I've got a hell of a lot of gigs coming up in February and March. So
what are you doing on the 13th of February, James?
Well, I'm making an appearance in an event called the Anti-Slam, which I very much enjoy. So yeah.
I'll let you say what it is, because I feel like
the Anti-Slam is an evening of bad poetry, and each poet has to compete to be the worst. I'm actually there in the capacity as a scorekeeper, and the Valentine's Day Anti-Slam is already.
And is it
a fixture
at the Hackney Picture House?
Yeah.
It is. It's in the attic.
Yeah, in the attic at the Hackney Picture House. And if people want to check out what dates you're going to be on, do you have a website?
Well, go to my Twitter best, because I link up everything there. At James Harris now.
Yeah, we'll put the link under the video. But do you have a blog?
You can read my blog at shoeleatherexpress.org. and yeah, so please do.
And Paula, what's coming up?
The next thing coming up, I got in trouble for not mentioning something recently, so I have to really think it through. What are the next things that are coming up? Next week, I will be in Exeter, and on looking up the Google Calendar, what date it is. On Monday, the 25th, if this podcast is up by then.
Yeah.
I will be running a workshop in the afternoon.
If not, bad luck.
Yeah. If you're in Exeter, if you happen to be listening to this in Exeter, but following on from that, I've also got the Anti-Slam, which I'm co-hosting.
Hooray.
I'll be in Manchester on the 9th of February for an event called Outspoken, which is a queer arts festival. It's their spoken word night with Keith Jarrett and AJ McKenna. And on March 11th will be the preview of Show Me the Money at Rich Mix. Everything is Paula Varjack. I'm the only Paula Varjack on the internet. It's Paula, obviously Paula. Varjack is like carjack but with a V. And I have a blog where I'm writing lots of stuff about art and money. And it's Show Me the Money, but the E in money is a 3, like the kids do, .tumblr.com.
Thank you very much, both of you. Yeah, and you can follow us on silent_tongue on Twitter, and I'll be retweeting and all of that shit. I was so bored of that. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
And thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
Good luck with the future and all that. Bye.